The first time I saw my wife's car perfectly parallel parked downtown, I thought nothing of it. The second time, I paused. The third time, on that rainy Tuesday in March, I stood across the street for 20 minutes, staring at her blue Volvo XC90 wedged between a smart car and a motorcycle with maybe 8 inches of total clearance. It was the kind of parking job that would make a driving instructor weep with joy. The thing is, Margaret can't parallel park. In 15 years of marriage, she'd never done it successfully. Not once. I remember teaching her when we first started dating back in 2009. We'd been together maybe 3 months, that sweet spot where everything feels electric but you're still discovering each other's quirks. She'd just gotten a promotion at her marketing firm, junior account executive, her first real corporate position, and needed to drive downtown for client meetings. Seattle's downtown parking situation is notorious. All parallel spots and tight quarters, nothing like the suburban sprawl where she'd grown up. "Come on, Rich," she'd said, using that nickname I pretended to hate but secretly loved. "Teach me your engineering magic. There must be a formula or something." We spent 3 hours in an empty lot with traffic cones I'd borrowed from a construction site. She'd approach each attempt with determination, gripping the wheel until her knuckles went white. That little furrow appearing between her eyebrows that I'd already learned meant she was concentrating hard. But every single time she'd either end up 3 feet from the curb or knock over the cones. After the 15th attempt, she'd scraped the side mirror against a cone and just started laughing. That musical laugh of hers that made me fall in love with her in the first place. "Why do I need to learn when I have you?" she'd said, leaning across the center console to kiss me. "You can be my designated parallel parker." It became our thing. For 15 years, through dating, engagement, marriage, 2 kids, 3 houses, 4 cars, and countless dinners downtown, I always handled the parallel parking. I'd drop her off at the entrance of wherever we were going, find a spot, and meet her inside. She'd joke to our friends that marrying me meant never having to parallel park again. At dinner parties, she'd tell the story of those 3 hours in the parking lot, embellishing it each time until in her version, she'd knocked over 50 cones and nearly taken out a streetlight. "Richard saved me from a life of taking the bus," she'd say, squeezing my hand under the table. My hero. Standing there in the Seattle drizzle that March afternoon, watching raindrops race down my umbrella, I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Her car was parked so perfectly, it looked like a computer had done it. The distance from the curb was exactly uniform, maybe 6 inches along the entire length of the vehicle. The spacing between the cars in front and behind was identical, mathematical in its precision. Maybe she'd finally learned. Maybe she'd been taking lessons as a surprise for our upcoming anniversary, 16 years in May. Maybe one of her coworkers had helped her. The rational part of my brain, the part that had engineered bridges and calculated load-bearing structures for 20 years, offered dozens of explanations. But the other part, the primitive part that evolution had fine-tuned over millions of years to detect danger and deception, was already whispering the truth. I checked my watch. 5:14 p.m. Margaret's marketing presentations usually wrapped up by 5 p.m. Her firm, Davidson and Associates, had moved to new offices in the Whitman building 6 months ago. "Better views," she'd said, "more prestigious address for client meetings." I found a coffee shop with a view of her car and ordered an overpriced latte I didn't want. The barista, a kid with more piercings than I could count, tried to make small talk about the weather. I just nodded, my eyes never leaving that perfectly parked Volvo. At 5:27, she emerged from the Whitman building, her red coat bright against the gray afternoon. She was alone, walking with that confident stride I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, the one that said she owned the sidewalk and everyone else was just borrowing it. Her hair was different. When had she started wearing it down for work? She'd always complained that it got in her way during presentations. She climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and then did something that made my coffee turn to acid in my stomach. She drove straight forward. No backing up, no careful maneuvering. No 17-point turn that ended with the car at a 45-degree angle to the curb. Just shifted into drive and pulled out smoothly, like the car had been parked normally in a regular spot. Someone else had parked that car. The drive home took forever. Seattle traffic is always bad, but that night it felt like the universe was giving me time to think, to process, to rationalize. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe the cars that had been parked around her had left, giving her more room. Maybe she'd gotten lucky. Maybe. But I knew. Deep down, in that part of your gut that knows things before your brain admits them, I knew. That night at dinner, while Sam complained about his algebra teacher, Mr. Peterson is literally the worst dad. He gave us 40 problems for homework. And Grace showed us her science project on volcanoes, complete with a baking soda eruption she'd tested 17 times in the backyard. I watched Margaret. Really watched her, like I hadn't in years. She looked the same as always, beautiful in that understated way that had aged gracefully. Her auburn hair now touched with premature silver, she refused to dye. I earned every one of these, she'd say. Those green eyes that still made my heart skip when they caught mine across a crowded room. She helped Grace adjust the volcano's crater, laughed at Sam's impression of his principal. No running in the halls, young man. And touched my hand when she passed me the salad bowl, her wedding ring catching the light. Everything normal, everything perfect, everything possibly a lie. How was your presentation today? I asked, keeping my voice casual, the same tone I'd used to ask about the weather or what we needed from the grocery store. Oh, exhausting, she said, not missing a beat, not even looking up from cutting her chicken. The clients kept asking for revisions. You know how tech startups are. They want to disrupt everything, even their own marketing campaigns. I had to park blocks away too. Downtown was a nightmare. Where did you end up parking? She waved her hand vaguely, the gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when she was discussing something unimportant. Oh, you know, one of those lots off Pine. Cost me $30 for 3 hours. Highway robbery. I nodded, cutting my chicken with unnecessary precision, each piece exactly the same size. There were no lots off Pine. They'd all been converted to residential permits 2 years ago when the city decided to prioritize neighborhood parking over commercial. I knew because I'd handled the engineering surveys for the conversion, spent 3 months analyzing traffic patterns and usage rates. The city had paid our firm $2.3 million for the study. $30 seems steep, I said. Downtown parking, she shrugged. What can you do? That night, as Margaret slept beside me, her breathing deep and even, one hand tucked under her pillow the way she'd slept since college, I stared at the ceiling and tried to understand how we'd gotten here. We'd been Richard and Margaret, the couple everyone envied. Our friends called us relationship goals, and not in that ironic way millennials use the phrase, but genuinely. We'd met at our mutual friend Jennifer's barbecue in 2008, one of those perfect Seattle summer days that locals live for. She'd been arguing with someone about whether the original Space Needle design was better than the renovation, passionate and animated, gesturing with a beer bottle for emphasis. I'd interrupted to point out that structurally, the renovation was necessary for earthquake safety. She'd turned those green eyes on me and said, "Are you always this romantic?" We'd talked for 6 hours straight, until Jennifer literally had to kick us out at 2 a.m. We had the house in Queen Anne that we'd bought as a fixer-upper and spent 5 years renovating together, learning to tile bathrooms from YouTube videos and arguing about paint colors. She won. The dining room was sage green instead of my preferred gray. We had the kids in good schools. Sam at Roosevelt, where my brother had gone. Grace at the Montessori Academy Margaret had researched for 6 months. We had careers that complemented each other, my engineering precision balancing her creative chaos. We still made love regularly, still laughed at each other's jokes even when we'd heard them dozens of times, still held hands at Sam's soccer games even when other parents had long since stopped pretending to like each other. When had it become a performance? I thought back, trying to pinpoint the moment things changed. Was it when her firm landed the Microsoft account and her hours doubled? When my dad died and I spent 3 months in a grief fog she didn't know how to navigate? When Sam started having trouble in school and we fought about whether to get him tested for ADHD? We did. He had it. The medication helped. When had we stopped being Richard and Margaret and become two people playing Richard and Margaret? The next Tuesday, I told my secretary, Janet, that I had a site inspection that would take all afternoon. She didn't question it. I'd been with the firm for 18 years, made senior partner 5 years ago. If I said I needed to inspect a site, I inspected a site. Instead, I positioned myself at a bistro on 2nd Avenue at 11:45, right where Margaret usually had her client meetings. The bistro was one of those aggressively trendy places that served $15 sandwiches with names like The Transcendentalist and Postmodern Panini. The waitress, who introduced herself as Sage, of course, seemed offended when I only ordered coffee. I picked a table by the window with a clear view of the street and waited. I didn't have to wait long. At 12:03, the Volvo appeared, creeping along the street like a lost tourist. Margaret was driving, her face tense with concentration as she looked for parking. She passed several open spots, all requiring parallel parking. One was huge, probably 20 feet long, the kind of spot I could have parked a bus in. She slowed, considered it, then kept driving. Then she pulled up alongside a spot between two cars, a space that would require expert maneuvering to enter. Even I would have had to concentrate for that one. That's when I saw him. He approached from the sidewalk, and my first thought was that he looked like every tech bro in Seattle. Early 30s, tall, with that carefully disheveled look that takes more effort than formal dress. Designer jeans that probably cost more than my suit. A Patagonia vest over a button-down shirt that was undoubtedly made from sustainable bamboo or recycled ocean plastic. Hair that was somehow both messy and perfect. That just rolled out of bed look that required $40 styling products. He knocked on her passenger window, and she smiled. Really smiled, not the polite smile she gave to strangers or the tired smile she gave me lately, but the one that crinkled her eyes and showed her slightly crooked incisor. The one she'd gotten self-conscious about after Grace was born, and she'd seen too many photos of herself. The smile I hadn't seen in months. She got out. He got in. In one fluid motion, like he'd done it 100 times before, he adjusted the seat, checked the mirrors, and slid that Volvo into the spot like he was pouring water into a glass. Perfect. Effortless. The whole thing took maybe 30 seconds. They stood on the sidewalk for a moment, talking. She laughed, touching his arm. Not a quick touch, but lingering. Her hand resting there, as she said something that made him grin. He said something that made her blush. Actually blush. Like she was 22 again, like when I'd first told her she was beautiful at Jennifer's barbecue, and she'd turned pink from her chest to her hairline. Then they walked together into the Fairmont Hotel. The Fairmont. Not some random office building or restaurant where a client meeting might make sense. The Fairmont Hotel, with its $150 lunch menu and its $1,000 a night suites and its reputation as the place where Seattle's elite conducted affairs, they thought nobody would notice. I sat there for 3 hours. The waitress, Sage, grew increasingly irritated with my presence, especially since I'd only ordered 2 coffees and picked at a $15 sandwich I couldn't taste. The lunch crowd came and went. Tech workers in their uniform of jeans and company hoodies. Lawyers in suits that cost more than most people's cars. Tourists confused by the menu prices. I watched them all, but mostly I watched that perfectly parked car. They emerged at 3:17, looking relaxed and pleased with themselves. Her hair was different, still down, but somehow neater, like she'd fixed it in a bathroom mirror. His shirt was untucked now, just slightly, the kind of detail you'd only notice if you were looking for it. They walked to the car together, and he went through the same routine in reverse. Got in, started it, pulled it forward so she wouldn't have to do anything but drive straight out. She kissed him on the cheek, just a friendly peck, nothing that would raise eyebrows if anyone from her office saw. The kind of kiss she gave her brother, or her gay hairdresser. Then she drove away, and he walked back toward the financial district, hands in his pockets, whistling. I followed him. Not closely, not obviously, just another suit in the afternoon crowd. Seattle's financial district is small enough that you can walk the whole thing in 15 minutes, but big enough that nobody notices another middle-aged white guy in business attire. He entered one of those converted warehouses that tech startups love, all exposed brick and ironic industrial fixtures. The lobby had a climbing wall because of course it did. The sign said, Neural Neck Solutions with a logo that looked like a brain made of circuit boards. I made a note and went back to my office. Janet looked up when I walked in. How was the site inspection? Informative, I said. Very informative. It took me less than an hour to find him online. The internet makes stalking depressingly easy if you know what you're looking for. Connor Bradley, 32, senior developer at Neural Next. MIT graduate, class of 2014, bachelor's in computer science with a minor in philosophy. Originally from Palo Alto, of course he was, worked at 3 different startups in San Francisco before relocating to Seattle. His LinkedIn showed he'd started at Neural Next 8 months ago. 8 months. I thought back, counting. That's when Margaret's downtown meetings had increased. When she'd started dressing differently, subtle changes I'd attributed to the new client demands. A new perfume. "It's Joe Malone," she'd said when I'd noticed. "The girls at work are all wearing it." More careful attention to her gym routine, Pilates 3 times a week instead of her usual sporadic yoga, the hair worn down instead of in her usual practical ponytail. 8 months of Tuesdays and Thursdays. His social media was a goldmine of tech bro cliches. Instagram photos of craft cocktails and hiking trails. Twitter rants about cryptocurrency and artificial intelligence. A Medium blog about mindful coding that had 17 followers. Photos from Burning Man, 2019, where he'd apparently built an interactive art installation that explored the intersection of human consciousness and machine learning. There were photos of him with various women, all blonde, all at least 5 years younger than him, all replaced every few months. Except for the last 8 months. The last 8 months, there were no women in his photos. I was supposed to be angry. That's what betrayed husbands do, right? They rage, they break things, they confront. They throw clothes on the lawn or change the locks or hire private investigators to get photos for the divorce lawyer. But sitting in my office looking at Connor Bradley's smug profile photo, standing on some mountain peak with his arms spread wide like he'd conquered nature itself, I felt something else entirely. Cold. Calculating. The same feeling I got when I had to solve a complex engineering problem, when a bridge design wasn't working and I had to find the flaw in the mathematics. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about structure, about finding the load-bearing points and understanding where to apply pressure, about controlled demolition. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented everything with the methodical precision I'd apply to a construction project. Tuesdays and Thursdays were their regular days, always downtown, always the same routine. He'd park her car, they'd disappear for 2 to 3 hours. He'd retrieve it for her. I started taking photos with a telephoto lens I bought specifically for this purpose. Nothing salacious, just timestamps and proof. Connor arriving, Margaret getting out of the car, them entering buildings together, the car in its perfectly parked position. I pulled parking records from the apps on her phone. She'd never been good about passwords, still used our anniversary date for everything. 051609, the day we'd gotten married at the courthouse because we couldn't wait for the big wedding we'd planned for that fall. The Fairmont on Tuesdays, always charged to her personal credit card, not the company one. A residential building on 3rd Avenue on Thursdays. I looked it up. Luxury apartments, the kind with doorman and concierge service. Always 2 to 3 hour stays. Always lunch hours or late afternoons when she was supposedly in meetings. The credit card statements told more of the story. Charges at the Fairmont bar, room service. A charge at La Perla, the lingerie store she'd never shopped at during our marriage. $60 for underwear. That's insane, Richard. A charge at a jewelry store for something that cost $800 that I'd never seen her wear. I installed a GPS tracker in her car. Not just a simple tracker from Amazon, but a professional-grade system that recorded everything. Every stop, every start, how long the engine ran, even the weight distribution changes that indicated different drivers. It recorded when the seat was adjusted, when mirrors moved, steering wheel positions. Everything time-stamped, everything uploaded to a cloud server only I could access. The data was damning and fascinating in equal measure. Connor drove her car at least twice a week. The seat moved forward 4 inches when he got in. He was taller than me but liked to sit closer to the wheel. The steering wheel lowered. The mirrors adjusted to specific angles I could track. The system even caught the difference in driving patterns. Margaret drove cautiously, lots of braking, tentative acceleration, never exceeding the speed limit by more than 3 miles per hour. Connor drove aggressively, quick acceleration, hard stops, averaging 8 miles over the speed limit, taking corners at speeds that made me wince even watching the data. But the GPS gave me something else, something I hadn't expected. 3 weeks into my surveillance, I noticed an anomaly in Connor's driving pattern. He'd stop at bars, Multiple bars, in the middle of the day, sometimes for just 10 minutes, enough time for a quick drink. The kind of behavior that seemed odd for lunch hours, especially when he was supposed to be with my wife. Pike's Pub on First Avenue, O'Malley's on 3rd, the whiskey bar in the Fairmont itself. Quick stops, never more than 15 minutes but consistent. The kind of pattern that suggested something more than casual drinking. I did more digging. Public records are beautiful things if you know where to look, and my engineering work had taught me to navigate municipal databases like a professional. Court records, DMV files, police reports. It's all there if you know how to search. Connor Bradley had 2 DUIs in California. The first in 2018, blood alcohol content 0.12, pled down to reckless driving. The second in 2023, BAC 0.15, couldn't plead it down. His license had been suspended 6 months ago, just before he moved to Seattle. He legally couldn't drive in any state. California suspensions are recognized nationwide. Yet here he was, driving my wife's car twice a week with her full knowledge and consent. That's when the plan started forming. Not just revenge, justice. Engineering justice. I started with research. Washington state law is very clear about allowing suspended drivers to operate your vehicle. It's insurance fraud if unreported. It's reckless endangerment if the driver has DUIs. If anything happens, the owner is fully liable, criminally and civilly. Margaret had exposed our family to massive legal and financial risk. She'd put our children's financial future in jeopardy, our house, our savings, everything we'd built together, all for afternoon hotel visits with a man who couldn't legally drive. The next phase required patience. I needed to wait for the perfect moment, gather all the evidence, and then bring the entire structure down at once, like a controlled demolition. Every charge placed precisely, timed to the millisecond, the building falling exactly where you want it. I chose a Tuesday 3 weeks later, April 18th. The weather forecast showed rain, which would make parking downtown even more challenging. I took a sick day from work, telling Janet I had a stomach bug. "Feel better, Richard," she'd said. "That's been going around." If only she knew what was really going around. I began my preparations at 5 a.m. First, I reserved every parking spot within 6 blocks of the Fairmont. I used my company's accounts, my personal apps, even created fake accounts with prepaid cards. ParkWiz, Spot Hero, Parking Panda, I hit them all. For the street spots that couldn't be reserved, I got creative. I paid 3 food trucks to occupy prime spots, telling them I was organizing a corporate event. I submitted emergency construction permits for others, using my engineering credentials to fast-track the approval. By 11 a.m., I'd created what I privately called a parking apocalypse, around their usual meeting spot. I also did something else. I called in an anonymous tip to Neural Next's HR department from a burner phone. "I thought you should know that one of your employees, Connor Bradley, has been drinking at bars during work hours. I've seen him at Pike's Pub multiple times during lunch. Given his history of DUIs, this seems like a liability issue for your company." The HR person thanked me for my concern and assured me they'd look into it. At 11:45, I positioned myself in my rental car, a gray Honda Civic, invisible in Seattle traffic, where I could watch the Fairmont entrance. The rain had started. That particular Seattle drizzle that's not quite rain but more than mist, the kind that makes everything slick and dangerous. Margaret arrived at 11:58. Connor was waiting at their usual spot, hunched under a black umbrella. But there was nowhere to park. They circled the block, then another, then another. I could see her getting frustrated through the windshield, gesturing with her hands the way she did when Sam left his homework until the last minute. Connor was checking his phone, probably looking for parking apps, not knowing I'd reserved everything. They tried the hotel valet, but I'd called ahead claiming a medical emergency that required keeping the entrance clear for an ambulance. The valet apologetically turned them away. They tried a parking garage 2 blocks away, but I'd reserved every spot for a fictional corporate event. They tried street parking, but between my food trucks and construction permits, there was nothing. Finally, after 30 minutes of searching, they parked 12 blocks away in a questionable spot, partly blocking a fire hydrant. They had to walk in the now pouring rain. Margaret's perfect hair was ruined by the time they reached the hotel. Connor's vest was soaked through. They looked miserable as they entered the lobby, nothing like the confident couple I'd watched for weeks. But that was just the appetizer. While they were in the hotel, I executed Phase 2. I filed a formal complaint with the DMV from my phone, attaching weeks of GPS data showing an unlicensed driver operating my vehicle. The timestamps, the routes, everything. I also called my insurance company, informing them that I'd discovered someone had been driving our car without my knowledge. Someone with a suspended license. I just found out, I said, playing the concerned husband. I installed a GPS tracker because I suspected the car was being used without permission. I had no idea it was this serious. The person driving has DUIs and a suspended license. What should I do? The insurance agent's tone changed immediately. Sir, this is a serious matter. We need to investigate immediately. Can you send us that GPS data? Of course. I want to do the right thing. I'm worried about liability. You're right to be concerned. If this person had an accident, you could be held fully responsible. We're going to need to review your policy. Phase 3 happened while Margaret and Connor were still in the hotel. The DMV, efficient for once in their existence, had already run Connor's information. His California suspension popped up immediately, along with the 2 DUIs. They issued an immediate warrant for his arrest for driving on a suspended license. Third offense, a felony in Washington state with mandatory jail time. At 2:45, Connor's phone started buzzing. He'd been in the hotel for less than an hour. I watched from my car as he came out, phone pressed to his ear, looking panicked. He gestured for Margaret to stay inside and practically ran toward their car 12 blocks away. I followed at a distance. He was still on the phone when 2 police cars converged on him 3 blocks from the car. They knew exactly where he'd be. The GPS data I'd provided included real-time tracking. I watched as they put him in handcuffs, read him his rights, put him in the back of the patrol car. Connor Bradley, MIT graduate, senior developer, Margaret's Tuesday and Thursday adventure, arrested on a Seattle street corner in the rain. Margaret didn't know yet. She was still in the hotel, probably wondering why Connor had left so abruptly. She'd find out soon enough. Thursday was when everything came together. I'd arranged for our son Sam to have a medical emergency at school. Nothing serious. I'd actually coordinated with the school nurse, Mrs. Patterson, who'd known our family for years. I'd told her Sam was feeling anxious about a test and might need to come home. You know how he gets about the advanced algebra finals, I'd said. His anxiety has been through the roof. She'd nodded sympathetically. Poor kid put so much pressure on himself. Don't worry, Mr. Donnelly. I'll take care of him. At 1:30 p.m., right when Margaret would normally be meeting Connor at the 3rd Avenue apartment, the school called her. Mrs. Donnelly, this is Mrs. Patterson from Roosevelt. Sam's having a panic attack. He's asking for you specifically. He needs to be picked up immediately. I was conveniently in Tacoma for a legitimate site inspection, a new bridge project that would keep me occupied all afternoon. Too far to help. I'd made sure of that, scheduling the inspection weeks in advance, making sure multiple people knew where I'd be. Margaret called me, and I could hear the panic in her voice. Richard, Sam needs me, but I'm stuck. The car, I can't get it out. What do you mean stuck? Where are you? Downtown, I had a meeting. Someone parked me in. I can't move the car. Her car was parked in one of Connor's expert parallel jobs, maybe 6 inches of clearance total between a contractor's van and a Mini Cooper. And Connor? He was in custody, had been since Tuesday, held without bail as a flight risk given his California residence. Can't you get it out? Just take your time, Margaret. Sam needs you. I listened to her breathing quicken, could practically hear her heart racing through the phone. I'll figure it out. For 45 minutes, she tried. I know because I was watching from across the street, having left my Tacoma inspection early, though she didn't know that. She'd get in, try to back up, get scared, pull forward, try again. Turn the wheel the wrong way. Try to remember how Connor did it, what angle he used, how he made it look so easy. On her 7th attempt, she scraped the BMW behind her, leaving a white streak on its black bumper. On her 10th, she hit the Audi in front, cracking its taillight. On her 15th, she was crying, mascara running down her face, hands shaking as she tried again. Both cars had extensive damage by now, Someone in an apartment above was recording on their phone. Someone else called the police. When the officers arrived, Margaret was sitting in the driver's seat, sobbing. Real tears, not the manipulative kind she sometimes used in arguments when she knew she was wrong, but genuine panic and frustration and fear. "Ma'am, can you explain how you got into this spot?" the first officer asked, looking at the impossibly tight space. She couldn't, because explaining would mean admitting Connor parked it. Admitting Connor meant admitting the affair. Admitting she'd been letting an unlicensed driver use our car. Admitting that she was supposed to be at work but was actually at an apartment downtown. I managed to squeeze in earlier, but now I can't get out." The officer looked skeptical. He walked around the car, examining the spacing, taking photos. "Ma'am, I've been doing this for 15 years. There's no way you parked this car. The geometry doesn't work. Someone would need to be an expert to get in this spot." "I did it. I was focused then. Now I'm stressed. My son is sick." "Have you been drinking, ma'am?" "No. No, I'm stressed. My son is having a panic attack at school. Please, I just need to get to him." They had her attempt to park again for them, to prove she could do it. She couldn't even get close. After 20 minutes of trying, with a crowd now gathered and multiple people filming, she gave up. The officers issued citations for both hit and runs, reckless driving, and lying to a police officer. The damage to the other vehicles was estimated at $47,000. Sam, meanwhile, was fine. The nurse had given him some crackers and let him lie down for an hour. When Margaret didn't show up, I'd left my inspection and picked him up myself. "Dad," he said as we drove home, "I wasn't really that anxious. Mrs. Patterson just said Mom needed to pick me up for some reason. Sometimes adults have emergencies, son. It's complicated." He looked at me with those eyes that were so much like mine, analytical and observant. "Is everything okay with Mom? We'll talk about it at home." That evening, after Margaret had finally gotten home, via Uber, as the police had impounded the car pending investigation, I sat her down in our living room. The kids were at my mother's house. I'd called her that morning, told her I needed her to watch them for the night. "Of course, Richard. Is everything all right?" "It will be, Mom, after tonight." Margaret looked destroyed. Her perfect makeup was gone, replaced by smeared mascara and red eyes. Her hair was a mess. Her hands were still shaking. She'd changed into sweatpants and one of my old t-shirts, the one from our trip to Maui for our 10th anniversary. "We need to talk about Connor," I said simply. The color that was left in her face drained completely. "I don't know what you mean." "Margaret, please, let's not insult each other's intelligence. I know about Connor. I know about the Fairmont. I know about the apartment on 3rd Avenue. I know he's been parking your car because you still can't parallel park after 15 years. And I know he was arrested on Tuesday for driving with a suspended license." She stared at me, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. How do you know about the arrest?" I pulled out my laptop and showed her everything. The GPS data showing every route, every stop, every time the seat was adjusted. The parking records showing dozens of visits to the Fairmont and the 3rd Avenue apartment. The photos of them entering buildings together. The credit card statements showing charges for hotel rooms and room service and lingerie. The DMV report about Connor's suspended license, his 2 DUIs, his pattern of drinking during the day. The insurance investigation that had already begun. "You let a man with multiple DUIs drive our car," I said, keeping my voice level, professional, like I was presenting findings to a client. "The car our children ride in, the car that's registered in both our names, you committed insurance fraud. You've exposed our family to massive liability, and that's just the legal issues." She tried to speak, but I continued, pulling up more documents on the laptop. "Our insurance company has already voided our policy based on the evidence of insurance fraud. The $47,000 in damage from today? That's on us personally. Well, on you personally, since I've already filed for legal separation and division of assets." Connor was arrested Tuesday afternoon at his office. Driving on a suspended license, 3rd offense. That's a felony with mandatory jail time. You're named as an accomplice since you knowingly provided the vehicle. "Richard, please, let me explain." Explain what? How you've been having an affair for 8 months? How you risked our children's safety? How you destroyed our marriage for someone who can't even legally drive? How you spent $40,000 of our money on hotel rooms and gifts for him? She was crying now, but I felt nothing. The engineer in me had calculated every variable, every outcome. The structure was falling exactly as planned, each support beam failing in sequence. I've already filed for divorce, I said, handing her the papers I'd drawn up weeks ago. I'm seeking full custody based on your reckless endangerment of our children's safety. My lawyer says it's almost guaranteed given the criminal charges you're facing. Criminal charges? Her voice was barely a whisper. Insurance fraud, reckless endangerment, accessory to driving without a license. The district attorney is very interested in your case. Apparently, they're trying to crack down on people who enable drunk drivers. You're looking at potential jail time, Margaret. She looked at the divorce papers, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold them. Richard, I love you. It was a mistake. Connor meant nothing. Connor meant so little that you risked everything for him? Our children's safety, our financial security, our marriage. I was lonely. You're always working, always at some site inspection or meeting. When was the last time you really looked at me? I'm looking at you now, and what I see is someone who was so afraid to learn to parallel park that she started an affair instead. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You needed someone to park your car and it evolved from there. Her silence was admission enough. The criminal charges were real and serious. The district attorney, looking at the evidence of repeated instances of allowing an unlicensed driver with DUIs to operate a vehicle, filed charges for insurance fraud and reckless endangerment. Margaret's marketing director's salary, $120,000 a year, which she'd been so proud of, couldn't cover the legal fees. She had to liquidate her 401k, taking the early withdrawal penalty, losing 30% of her retirement savings just to pay her lawyer. Her company found out when she couldn't drive to client meetings. Davidson and Associates had a strict policy about employee conduct that reflected on the company. When they discovered she'd been using her company car allowance, $800 a month, for a vehicle involved in fraud, and that she'd been lying about client meetings to conduct an affair, they terminated her immediately. No severance. No recommendation. 15 years with the company gone in a single HR meeting. We trusted you, Margaret, her boss, Jennifer Davidson herself, had said. You were supposed to be a role model for the younger employees. Instead, you've exposed us to potential liability and damaged our reputation. Connor fared no better. The arrest at his office had been spectacular. 2 police cars pulling up to Neural Next's trendy entrance. Officers walking through the climbing wall lobby past the juice bar and meditation pods to arrest him at his standing desk in front of his entire team. 90 days in county jail for the 3rd offense. No early release possible. His startup, terrified of the liability and the publicity, fired him the day he was arrested. The tech world is small and gossipy. Within a week, everyone in Seattle's tech scene knew about the senior developer who'd been arrested for driving on a suspended license while having an affair with a married woman. No tech company would touch him after that. His GitHub profile, once showing steady contributions to various projects, went dark. His LinkedIn changed from senior developer at Neural Next to seeking new opportunities, then eventually just disappeared entirely. Last I heard, he was working in a restaurant in Portland, washing dishes and taking the bus to work because he couldn't get his license reinstated for at least 5 years. The divorce was swift and brutal. My documentation was so thorough that Margaret's lawyer, a tired-looking man named Peterson who specialized in hopeless cases, advised her to take whatever I offered. You're lucky he's offering anything, Peterson told her in a meeting I wasn't supposed to know about but did, because Margaret had to use my laptop when hers was confiscated as evidence. She'd forgotten to log out of her email. With this level of documentation and the criminal charges, he could take everything. She got minimal alimony for 2 years, just enough to meet the state requirements, and supervised visitation with the kids every other weekend. She couldn't drive them anywhere since her license was suspended for 6 months, and even after that, no insurance company would cover her for less than $800 a month, with a $5,000 deductible. The house in Queen Anne, the one we'd spent 5 years renovating, stayed with me and the kids. Her name was removed from the deed. The investment accounts, the savings, the kids' college funds, all protected in my name now. She got her clothes, her jewelry, except the pieces I'd bought, and her 2018 Honda Civic that she'd had to buy with cash because no bank would give her a car loan with pending criminal charges. She moved back in with her parents in Spokane, 3 hours away. The humiliation was complete. The successful marketing director who'd once presented to Microsoft executives, who'd won industry awards for her campaigns, reduced to living in her childhood bedroom at 42. The room still had her high school debate team trophies on the shelf. Her mother called me, begging, "Richard, please. She made a mistake. People have affairs all the time. Don't destroy her life over this." I didn't destroy her life, Sharon. She did that herself when she chose to let a drunk driver use our family car. When she chose to lie for 8 months. When she chose another man over her family's safety. You're being cruel. I'm being factual. She committed crimes. Real crimes with real victims. Those damaged cars belong to people. The insurance fraud affects everyone's premiums. The risk she took could have killed someone if Connor had driven drunk with our kids in the car. She would never what? Put our children at risk? She already did. Every time she let Connor drive that car, she risked everything. What if he'd been drinking at one of his bar stops and hit someone? What if the kids had been in the car? What if he'd killed someone? We would have lost everything. The house, the savings, the kids' college funds, all of it. Sharon hung up on me. She called back a week later to apologize, said she'd looked up the laws and understood now how serious it was. But the damage to their relationship was done. Margaret's parents, who'd always enabled her, who'd always made excuses for her failures, couldn't excuse this. The kids handled it better than I expected, though differently from each other. Sam, 14, and already showing the analytical mind that would probably lead him to engineering like me, understood without much explanation. "Mom couldn't parallel park, could she?" he said one evening, about 3 months after everything exploded. We were in the garage, working on his robotics project for school. "No, son, she couldn't." But she pretended she could. She lied about it. I chose my words carefully, tightening a bolt with perhaps more force than necessary. Sometimes people lie about small things, and those lies become bigger things. They snowball. Like how she lied about the client meetings. I looked at him, surprised. "How did you know about that?" "I'm not stupid, Dad. She was supposed to be in meetings, but she was at hotels. The police report is public record. I looked it up." "Sam, I get it, Dad. She chose some random guy over us. She chose not being embarrassed about parking over being honest. It's actually kind of pathetic when you think about it." "Don't talk about your mother that way." "Why not?" "It's true. She literally destroyed our family because she couldn't admit she couldn't do something everyone else can do. Grace can parallel park better than Mom, and Grace doesn't even have her permit yet." He was right about Grace. I'd been teaching her in empty parking lots, and she'd picked it up immediately. "It's just angles, Dad," she'd said, after nailing it on her 3rd try. "Like geometry, but with cars." Grace, at 11, was more confused than angry, but she adapted. She missed her mother at first, cried for her at bedtime, asked why Mommy couldn't live with us anymore. "Sometimes adults make choices that mean they have to live separately," I'd explained, holding her while she cried into my shoulder. "Did Mommy choose someone else over us?" "It's complicated, sweetheart. That means yes." As Margaret's visits became more sporadic, it's hard to maintain a relationship when you can't drive and live 3 hours away, Grace grew closer to me. I learned to braid hair from YouTube videos, the same platform that had taught us to tile bathrooms. I figured out how to navigate the mysterious world of 11-year-old girl politics, which was somehow more complex than any engineering project I'd ever tackled. I became both parents, and I found I was good at it. I learned to pack lunches with little notes like Margaret used to. I learned the names of all Grace's friends and their drama. Who was friends with whom this week? Who had a crush on which boy? Why Taylor was being mean to Madison. I learned to sit through dance recitals and not just attend, but actually watch, actually care whether her pirouette was better than last time. With Sam, I coached his soccer team, helped with his robotics club, taught him to drive in parking lots even though he couldn't get his permit for another year. We built a computer together from scratch, him reading the instructions while I handled the delicate connections. "Dad," he said one evening while we were installing the graphics card, "I'm glad you're here. Where else would I be? I mean, I'm glad you didn't leave, like Mom did. I'll never leave you guys, ever. Even if we disappoint you. I put down the screwdriver and looked at him. Sam, you could never disappoint me. Make mistakes? Sure. Make bad choices? Probably. But disappoint me? Never. Even if I can't parallel park? Despite everything, I laughed. I'll teach you until you can. But if you genuinely can't after really trying, we'll figure it out. The important thing is to be honest about what you can and can't do. Unlike Mom. Sam? I know. Don't talk about her that way. But Dad, she lied to us. For 8 months. She let some stranger drive the car we were in. What if he'd been drunk? That's why she's not living with us anymore. To keep you safe. And because she cheated on you. That too. A year later, I was at Sam's soccer game when I met Diana. She was there watching her nephew, standing on the sideline in the rain like a true Seattle native. No umbrella, just a good rain jacket and waterproof boots. We started talking about the game, then about kids, then about life. She was a driving instructor of all things, which I found out when she mentioned she had to leave early for a lesson. A driving instructor? I couldn't help but laugh. That's an interesting reaction, she said, smiling. Usually people just ask if I'm terrified all the time. Are you? Only when teaching parallel parking. That's when people really panic. Let me guess, I said. You're either the worst driver in the world, or you have a very specific reason for finding that ironic. She laughed, a genuine sound that made something in my chest loosen for the first time in months. Actually, I'm an excellent driver. Been teaching for 15 years. I can parallel park a bus in a space meant for a Mini Cooper. My ex-wife couldn't parallel park. Still can't, actually. Well, supposedly she can now, but it took destroying our marriage for her to learn. Diana raised an eyebrow. That's either a really interesting story or you're the world's strictest driving instructor. The first one. Buy you coffee after the game and I'll tell you. Only if you promise to let me drive. I want to see if you critique my parallel parking. We've been dating for 6 months now. She's taught both kids advanced driving techniques even though Sam just got his permit last week. Grace can identify every type of parking by name and can execute a perfect 3-point turn in our driveway. Diana finds the whole situation with Margaret amusing in a dark way. She really let another man park her car for 8 months rather than just learn to do it herself, she asked after I'd told her the whole story. Every Tuesday and Thursday. That's the most elaborate avoidance of personal growth I've ever heard. And I've taught teenagers who tried to bribe me to pass them without teaching them to merge on the freeway. Did you take the bribes? Do I look like someone who compromises on safety? Number. You look like someone who would make them practice merging until they cried, then make them do it again. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Diana doesn't just teach the kids to drive. She teaches them about responsibility, about owning your limitations and working to overcome them. She tells them stories from her work. The 60-year-old woman who finally learned to drive after her husband died. The teenager with anxiety who took 8 months to get comfortable behind the wheel but eventually became one of her best students. The CEO who hired her for private lessons because he'd been having his assistant drive him everywhere and finally admitted he needed to learn. Everyone has something they can't do, she tells Grace one afternoon while teaching her to back into a parking space. The difference between successful people and everyone else is that successful people admit what they can't do and then learn. Last month, Margaret called. She'd finally gotten her license back and had been practicing parallel parking. She wanted to borrow money for a better car, said the Civic was unreliable. I've been practicing, she said, her voice small and hopeful. I can parallel park now. I passed the test on my first try. That's good, Margaret. Maybe I could come see the kids more if I had a reliable car. The court schedule is every other weekend. A car won't change that. Richard, please. Haven't I been punished enough? I thought about it. The financial ruin. She'd declared bankruptcy 6 months ago. The professional destruction. She was working part-time at a marketing firm in Spokane for a quarter of her previous salary. The social humiliation. Everyone in our social circle knew what had happened. The criminal record that would follow her forever. The loss of her children. She saw them 4 days a month, supervised. The loss of her home, The house she'd spent 5 years making perfect. Was it enough? Margaret, I said finally, you let a drunk driver operate the car our children rode in. You chose an affair over their safety. You chose your ego over their well-being. So no, I don't think you've been punished enough. I don't think you can ever be punished enough for that. She was crying when she hung up. I heard from her mother later that she'd failed her first attempt at the driving test after getting her license back. Still couldn't parallel park under pressure. The second time, she passed, but barely. The instructor said she was technically proficient but clearly terrified, Sharon told me during one of our rare conversations about logistics for the kids' visits. She can do it, but she'll probably avoid it forever. There's a certain poetry to that, I think. She finally learned the skill that could have saved her marriage, but she learned it too late and too fearfully to ever really use it. I keep a photo on my desk at work now. It's from a security camera. Margaret trying to get out of that spot on the day everything collapsed, her face contorted with panic and frustration, tears visible even in the grainy footage. When clients ask about it, I tell them it's a reminder about the importance of documentation and structural integrity. What happened? They usually ask. A structure collapsed because someone ignored the fundamental requirements, I say. Someone thought they could fake competence instead of developing it. They built on a foundation of lies instead of skills. The whole thing came crashing down. They nod sagely, thinking, I'm talking about a building or a bridge. In a way, I suppose I am. Marriages are structures too, built on foundations of trust and honesty. When you replace those with lies and deception, collapse is inevitable. Sam got his learner's permit last week. Diana and I took him to an empty parking lot with cones. He nailed parallel parking on his third try. It's just geometry, Dad, he said. Angles and spatial relationships. If you understand the math, you can do it perfectly every time. That's exactly right. Mom never understood geometry, did she? No, son. She never did. Is that why she did what she did? Because she couldn't understand the angles? I thought about it. In a way, yes. She couldn't understand the angles of the parking, but more importantly, she couldn't understand the angles of life, the geometry of choices. How one lie creates an angle that requires another lie, and another, until the whole structure is so distorted it can't stand. That's pretty deep, Dad. Sometimes the simple things teach us the biggest lessons. We practiced for another hour, until he could do it perfectly every time. Diana coached him through the harder spots, teaching him tricks she'd learned from 15 years of instruction. Grace watched from the back seat, taking notes for when it would be her turn. The key, Diana told him, is to commit. Once you start the maneuver, follow through. Hesitation is what causes accidents. Like in life, Sam asked. Exactly like in life. Margaret still lives with her parents. She works at a small marketing firm in Spokane, doing social media management for local businesses. She drives a 2010 Honda Civic she bought for cash after saving for months. She sees the kids every other weekend when her parents drive her to Seattle because she's still too nervous to make the 3-hour drive alone. Connor is still in Portland, still taking the bus. His LinkedIn recently updated to show he's working as a line cook at a brew pub. The MIT graduate who once built neural networks now builds sandwiches. He can't get his license reinstated for another 4 years, and even then, it'll require proof of sobriety, SR22 insurance that costs thousands a year, and a breathalyzer installed in any car he drives. They don't talk anymore. How could they? The thing that brought them together, her need for someone to park her car, his need to feel superior, destroyed both their lives. The parallel parking that seemed so romantic, him swooping in to save her from her inadequacy, became the very thing that exposed them. Sometimes I drive by the spot where everything unraveled. That impossible space between the BMW and the Audi, where Margaret's lies finally caught up with her. It's just a regular parking space now, nothing special about it. But to me, it's a monument to truth. You can fake a lot of things in life. You can fake love, fake happiness, fake success. You can fake client meetings and work emergencies. But you can't fake a perfect parallel park. The geometry doesn't lie. The angles are either right or they're wrong. The car either fits or it doesn't. Margaret never understood that. She thought she could outsource the hard parts, have someone else handle what she couldn't do. She thought love meant covering for each other's weaknesses instead of helping each other overcome them. But that's not how life works. Sooner or later, you're alone in the driver's seat. The space is tight. Everyone's watching, and you either can or can't do it. She couldn't. I think about the 15 years we spent together. All those times I parked for her, enabled her inability, made it cute and romantic instead of recognizing it for what it was. A refusal to be complete, to be competent, to be honest about her limitations. I was complicit in my own betrayal, teaching her that she didn't need to grow, that someone would always be there to handle the hard parts. Would things have been different if I'd insisted she learn from the beginning? If instead of making it our thing, I'd made it her thing to overcome? Maybe. Or maybe she would have just found another Connor sooner, another thing she couldn't do, another way to avoid the truth about herself. It doesn't matter now. The structure has collapsed, the debris has been cleared, and I've built something new, something better, something with solid foundations and no hidden weaknesses. Diana parallel parked yesterday at the grocery store. One smooth motion, perfectly centered, 6 inches from the curb. She didn't even think about it, just did it naturally, competently, honestly. Nice parking, I said. She shrugged. It's just parking, Richard. Everyone should be able to do it. Not everyone can. Everyone can learn if they're willing to admit they need to. That's the difference. Diana would never pretend to be something she's not. If she couldn't do something, she'd learn. She wouldn't find someone else to do it for her. She wouldn't build an elaborate deception to hide her inadequacy. She'd face it, fix it, and move forward. Margaret called again last week. She wanted to tell me she'd been promoted at her new job, made senior social media coordinator. A small victory, but she was proud. I'm also seeing someone, she said quietly. His name is Paul. He's an accountant, divorced, 2 kids. Good for you. He's teaching me to drive on the highway. I've been avoiding it, but he says I need to learn. He's right. I know. I'm trying to not repeat mistakes. There was silence on the line. Then quietly, I'm sorry, Richard. For everything. I should have just learned to park. I should have been honest about what I couldn't do. Yes, I said. You should have. Do you think? She started, then stopped. Never mind. What, Margaret? Do you think if I'd learned to parallel park years ago, none of this would have happened? I considered lying, offering her some comfort. But I'd learned the value of truth even when it hurts. Yes, I said. I think if you'd been willing to face your inadequacies and fix them instead of hiding them, everything would be different. But it wasn't really about the parking, was it? It was about being willing to be vulnerable, to fail, to grow. You chose deception over development. She was crying when she hung up. The kids are thriving. Sam's almost ready for his driving test. He can parallel park in spaces I wouldn't even attempt, sliding in with a confidence that comes from genuine skill, not bravado. He's also the captain of his robotics team, designing mechanisms with the same precision he applies to parking. Grace has announced she wants to be an engineer like me to build things that don't fall down. She's 11 and already understands structural integrity better than most adults. She draws blueprints for impossible buildings, calculating load-bearing walls and foundation requirements. Dad, she said last week, I want to build a bridge. What kind of bridge? The kind that doesn't collapse when someone lies about its strength. Diana and I are talking about marriage, but we're in no rush. We're building something solid, taking our time, making sure the foundation is perfect. She's moved in gradually. First a toothbrush, then some clothes. Then suddenly she's redecorating the bathroom and I'm learning that there are apparently 15 different shades of white paint. This is Swiss coffee, and this is cloud white, she explained, holding up 2 samples that looked identical to me. They're both white. Men, she sighed. This is why you need women, to see the subtle differences. I needed a woman to see that my ex-wife was having an affair. No, you figured that out yourself. You needed a woman to teach you that not all women are like your ex-wife. She was right. Diana had taught me to trust again, but more importantly, she'd taught the kids that not all relationships are built on deception. She showed them what honest partnership looked like, acknowledging weaknesses, working on them together, celebrating growth. Last week, I had to go downtown for a client meeting. I found myself on the street where it all started, where I first saw Margaret's impossibly well-parked car. The same spot was open, that impossible 8-inch clearance space between a smart car and a motorcycle. I looked at it for a moment, remembering everything that space represented. Then I signaled, backed up, and slid into it perfectly. One motion. No hesitation. No fear. An older woman on the sidewalk actually applauded. "That was beautiful," she said. "You don't see parking like that anymore. Everyone relies on those backup cameras and parking sensors. No one knows how to actually drive anymore." "Thank you," I said. "It's taken years of practice." "Worth it, though," she said. "The things that are hard to learn are usually the most important." My late husband always said that. He was a teacher. Smart man. He was. He also said you can tell everything about a person by how they park. People who can't park are usually trying to hide other things they can't do. I thought about Margaret, probably sitting in her childhood bedroom, finally able to parallel park, but with nowhere important to go. I thought about Connor, taking the bus through Portland rain, his license gone forever, his promising career destroyed by his ego and his drinking. I thought about the price of deception, the cost of shortcuts, the inevitable collapse of structures built on lies. "Your husband was right," I told the woman. "Parking tells you everything." Walking to my meeting, I passed the Fairmont Hotel. They've renovated the entrance, made it grander, more impressive. A valet stand now promises expert parking service. I wondered if Margaret ever drives by, if she remembers those Tuesday afternoons, if she thinks about how much she lost for those 2-hour escapes. My phone buzzed, a text from Sam with a photo. Him standing next to the car at school, perfectly parked between two trucks with barely any space. "Dad, parallel parked at school today. Everyone was watching. Nailed it first try. Thanks for teaching me, right?" I smiled and texted back, "Proud of you. Remember, it's not just about parking." "I know, Dad. It's about doing things right, even when they're hard. Especially when they're hard. Unlike some people we know." He didn't need to say who. We both knew. Margaret's failure had become our family's cautionary tale, the example of what happens when you fake competence instead of developing it. That evening, Diana and I took the kids out for dinner downtown. The restaurant had only parallel parking available, all tight spots that would have challenged most drivers. Diana took one, I took another, and we let Sam practice with the third. 3 perfect parks, no assistance needed. "You know what I love about this family?" Grace said as we walked into the restaurant. "What's that?" Diana asked. "Everyone can park their own car," Sam laughed. "That's a weird thing to love." "No, it's not," Grace insisted. "It means everyone is honest about what they can do. No one's hiding anything." Diana reached over and squeezed my hand. "Out of the mouths of babes," she whispered. "She's right, though," I whispered back. "I know. That's why it's profound." During dinner, Diana told us about her newest student, a 70-year-old woman whose husband had recently died. She never learned to drive because he drove her everywhere. Now she's determined to learn. Today, she parallel parked for the first time. She cried. "Happy tears?" Grace asked. "The happiest." She said it meant she was finally complete, finally independent. "That's sad that it took her that long," Sam said. "Better late than never," Diana replied. "Some people never learn at all. They just keep depending on others to handle the hard parts." "Like Mom," Grace said quietly. We all fell silent for a moment. Then Diana, bless her, said, "Your mom learned eventually. It cost her everything, but she learned. That takes a certain kind of courage, too." "Not as much courage as learning in the first place," Sam said. "No," I agreed. "Not as much." After dinner, we walked through downtown, past the buildings where Margaret and Connor had met, past the police station where he'd been booked, past the courthouse where our divorce was finalized. The kids didn't know the significance of these places, and I didn't tell them. But Diana knew. She squeezed my hand as we passed each one. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "More than okay. I'm free." "Free from what?" "From enabling." from covering for someone else's weaknesses, from pretending things were fine when they weren't. That's the best kind of freedom. We passed a driving school, its windows covered with signs advertising parallel parking lessons. Learn the skill everyone needs, one proclaimed. Don't let parking limit your life, said another. We should send Mom there, Grace said, then immediately looked guilty. Sorry, that was mean. It was honest, Sam said. There's a difference. Sometimes honesty feels mean, Diana said carefully. But lies feel worse in the long run. Is that why you and Dad work? Grace asked Diana suddenly. Because you're both honest? Diana looked at me, then back at Grace. That's part of it. We're honest about what we can and can't do, like I can't cook to save my life. Your dad knows this. I don't pretend otherwise. She really can't, I confirmed. She burned water once. It evaporated completely. That's basically burning. But you admit it, Grace said. You don't hide it or make Dad cook everything and pretend you did it. Exactly. I order takeout and own it. We all laughed, but there was truth in the humor. Diana and I worked because we didn't hide our flaws. We acknowledged them, worked on them when possible, accepted them when not. There was no deception, no elaborate schemes to cover inadequacies. The next morning was Saturday, and I woke early to find Diana already up, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop and coffee. She was working on her lesson plans for the next week. New student? I asked, pouring my own coffee. Yeah, a teenager with anxiety about highway merging. Going to take it slow. You're good at that, taking it slow. She looked up at me. Is that a criticism of my driving? It's a compliment about everything. You don't rush. You don't take shortcuts. You do things right. Unlike some people's ex-wives? Can we have one conversation that doesn't come back to Margaret? Sorry. You're right. She closed her laptop. It's just, the whole thing is so absurd. An 8-month affair because she couldn't parallel park. It's like a bad comedy sketch. Except it destroyed multiple lives. Yeah, that part's not funny. Connor's mother called me last week, I said, sitting down across from her. What? Why? Wanted to know if I'd write a letter to help him get his license back earlier. Said he's learned his lesson. He's been sober for 6 months. He's reformed. What did you say? I said he made his choices and has to live with the consequences, just like Margaret. That seems fair. His mother said I was ruining her son's life over nothing. Diana reached across the table and took my hand. Driving drunk isn't nothing. Having an affair with a married woman isn't nothing. Using that woman's car illegally isn't nothing. You didn't ruin his life. He did. I know. But sometimes I wonder if I went too far. The GPS tracker, the setup with the parking calling the DMV. You protected your kids. You exposed crimes that were already being committed. You didn't create the situation. You just revealed it. She was right, of course. I hadn't made Margaret have an affair. I hadn't made Connor drive without a license. I hadn't made them meet at hotels and apartments. I'd just documented it and let the legal system handle the rest. Sam came downstairs, already dressed for soccer practice. Dad, can you drive me? I want to practice parallel parking on the way. You're 15. You can't drive to practice. I meant in the parking lot when we get there, before practice starts. Sure. Grace appeared, still in pajamas. Can I come? I want to watch. Soccer practice is boring, Sam warned. Parking practice isn't. This was our family now. Kids who wanted to watch parking practice. A girlfriend who taught driving for a living. Conversations about honesty and competence over breakfast. It wasn't what I'd planned when Margaret and I had bought that house in Queen Anne, when we'd talked about our future over wine and takeout, when we'd promised to love each other forever. But it was real. It was honest. It was built on solid foundations. At soccer practice, I let Sam practice parking while Grace critiqued from the sideline. You're too far from the curb, she called out. I'm 6 inches away. Should be 4. Diana says 6 is fine. Diana's being nice because you're learning. I watched them bicker and thought about Margaret's last visit. She'd successfully parked on the street, parallel parked even, but it had taken her 3 attempts and she'd been visibly shaking when she got out of the car. The kids had watched from the window. She did it, Grace had said, surprised. Finally, Sam had added. They'd been polite during the visit, talking about school and friends, but there was a distance now that couldn't be bridged. Margaret had chosen Connor over them, chosen her ego over their safety, and kids don't forget that kind of betrayal. Do you miss her? I'd asked them after she left. I miss who I thought she was, Sam had said, wise beyond his years. I miss having a mom who lived with us, Grace had added. But I don't miss the lying. How did you know she was lying? We didn't then, but looking back there were signs, like how she was always busy on Tuesdays and Thursdays, how she smelled different some days, how she seemed guilty all the time. Kids notice everything, even when we think we're protecting them. A month later, Margaret's criminal trial began. She'd pleaded no contest to the insurance fraud charges, hoping for leniency. I had to testify, presenting the GPS evidence, the timeline, the documentation of Connor's suspended license. Mr. Donnelly, her lawyer asked on cross-examination, isn't it true that you installed this GPS device to spy on your wife? I installed it to understand why our family vehicle was being used in ways that seemed suspicious. You were jealous. I was concerned about safety. As it turns out, rightfully so. You wanted to destroy your wife's life. No, I wanted to protect my children from someone who was allowing a drunk driver to operate the vehicle they rode in. The prosecutor had shown the court Connor's record: 2 DUIs, multiple violations, a pattern of disregard for public safety. She'd shown how Margaret had known about his suspended license but let him drive anyway, even encouraged it to facilitate their affair. Margaret was sentenced to 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and $50,000 in restitution to the insurance company. The judge had been stern. Mrs. Donnelly, you didn't just commit insurance fraud. You endangered public safety by allowing someone you knew to be a dangerous driver to operate your vehicle. The fact that you did this to facilitate an extramarital affair makes it worse, not better. You put your personal desires above public safety and your own children's well-being. Margaret had cried throughout the sentencing. Connor, who'd already been sentenced to 90 days in jail and 5 years without a license, wasn't there. He'd already moved to Portland, already started his new life as a nobody. After the trial, Margaret's mother approached me outside the courthouse. Are you happy now? Sharon asked, her voice bitter. No, I said honestly. None of this makes me happy, but it was necessary. She's destroyed. She destroyed herself. I just documented it. You could have forgiven her. I could have. But forgiveness without accountability isn't forgiveness. It's enabling. And I've done enough enabling for one lifetime. Sharon walked away without another word. I heard later that Margaret's relationship with her parents had become strained. They'd bailed her out her whole life, covered for her mistakes, made excuses for her failures. This was too big for even them to excuse. The restitution payments meant Margaret had to sell everything of value she owned. Her jewelry, her designer clothes, even her car. She bought a 15-year-old Toyota Corolla with manual windows and no power steering. She had to learn to parallel park all over again without the backup cameras and sensors she'd grown dependent on. It's actually harder than the Volvo, she'd told me during one of our few civil conversations about the kids' schedule. No power steering means you really have to commit to the turn. Most things are harder without assistance, I'd replied. She looked at me sharply, understanding the double meaning. I know what I lost, Richard. You don't have to keep reminding me. I'm not trying to remind you. I'm trying to make sure you understand why. Because I couldn't parallel park, I get it. No, because you chose deception over growth. The parking was just the symptom. Diana and I got married the following spring. It was a small ceremony in the backyard, just family and close friends. Sam was my best man, looking impossibly grown up in his suit, already taller than his mother. Grace was Diana's maid of honor, having declared that traditional wedding roles were outdated but acceptable if reimagined. Diana's father, a retired Boeing engineer, pulled me aside during the reception. She told me the whole story, he said, about your ex-wife and the parking. And I taught Diana to parallel park when she was 15. Took her one afternoon. She was determined to get it perfect. That's how I knew she'd succeed in life. She didn't move on until she'd mastered it. She's incredible. She is. And she chose you, which means you are too. Don't let her down. I won't. I know. Because you're the kind of man who documents everything and faces truth head on. That's rare these days. During the reception, Diana's driving school students had created a video message. One by one, they talked about how she'd changed their lives by teaching them not just to drive, but to be honest about their limitations and work through them. Ms. Diana taught me that avoiding something because it's hard just makes it harder later, one teenage girl said. She made me parallel park 100 times until I stopped being scared of it, an elderly man added. Now I can park anywhere. I feel free. The last message was from the 70-year-old woman Diana had mentioned months ago, the one whose husband had died. Diana didn't just teach me to drive, she said, tears in her eyes. She taught me that it's never too late to become complete, to stop depending on others for what you should do yourself. My husband was wonderful, but he enabled my dependence. Diana enabled my independence. There wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. Margaret wasn't invited, obviously, but she sent a card. Inside, she'd written, "Congratulations. Diana is lucky to have someone who values honesty. I learned too late. Be happy." I showed it to Diana. That's actually mature of her, Diana said. She's trying. The court-mandated therapy seems to be helping. Do you think she'll ever really change? I think she's already changed. Whether it sticks depends on whether she's doing it for herself or for appearances. Which do you think it is? I honestly don't know, and it's not my problem anymore. The kids adjusted to Diana as a stepmother remarkably well. She didn't try to replace Margaret, didn't pretend to be their mother. She was just Diana, the woman who taught them to drive, who couldn't cook but could navigate any road in Washington state blindfolded, who treated them like intelligent humans rather than fragile children. I like that she doesn't pretend, Grace told me one evening. Mom always pretended things were fine when they weren't. Diana just says what's true. Even when the truth is uncomfortable? Especially then. Sam passed his driving test on his 16th birthday. Perfect score, including parallel parking. The examiner, an older woman who'd probably failed hundreds of teenagers, actually complimented him. That was the best parallel parking I've seen in years, she said. Who taught you? My dad and stepmom. They're both obsessed with doing things right. Good obsession to have. That evening, we celebrated at Sam's favorite restaurant. He drove us there, parallel parking in a spot so tight that other drivers stopped to watch. Show off, Grace muttered. It's not showing off if you can actually do it, Sam replied. That's literally the definition of showing off. No, showing off is pretending you can do something you can't, like Mom did. The table went quiet for a moment. We'd all gotten better about not constantly bringing up Margaret, but sometimes it just came out. Sorry, Sam said. I shouldn't have said that. It's okay, I told him. You're not wrong, but we need to move forward. Hard to move forward when she keeps trying to insert herself back, he said. He was referring to Margaret's recent request to modify the custody arrangement. She wanted unsupervised visits, longer weekends, holiday time. Her lawyer argued that she'd completed her community service, was current on restitution payments, and had been in therapy for a year. My client has shown remarkable growth, the lawyer had argued. She's acknowledged her mistakes, taken responsibility, and worked to better herself. The judge had looked at me. Mr. Donnelly, what's your position? I want what's best for the children. If psychiatric evaluation shows she's genuinely changed, if she can demonstrate consistent responsible behavior, I'm willing to consider modified arrangements. But trust has to be earned, not granted. The judge ordered a psychiatric evaluation and a 6-month probationary period of supervised visits before any changes would be considered. Margaret had texted me after, "Thank you for not fighting it completely." I want the kids to have a mother, I'd replied, just a trustworthy one. I'm working on it. Good. And she was working on it, I had to admit. She'd gotten a steady job, was paying restitution consistently, attended therapy twice a week. She'd even started teaching parallel parking at a community center, community service that wasn't court-ordered. She teaches parking now? Diana had laughed when she heard. That's ironic. Or appropriate. Teaching what you struggled to learn yourself can be powerful. Speaking from experience, I teach the kids about honesty and trust every day. You think that comes naturally to me after what happened? Good point. Connor, meanwhile, had completely disappeared from our lives. His social media went dark after his release from jail. His LinkedIn showed him working at various restaurants in Portland, never lasting more than a few months at each. The MIT graduate, who'd once commanded a six-figure salary, was now making minimum wage plus tips. Taking the bus in the rain, living in a shared apartment with 3 roommates according to the one update his mother had sent me. Begging again for help with his license restoration. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, don't deserve rebuilding. 2 years passed. Sam went to college, engineering at UW, following in my footsteps but making his own path. His essay about learning to parallel park as a metaphor for facing life's challenges got him accepted to every school he applied to. I wrote about how you and Diana taught me that competence isn't inherited or faked. It's earned through practice, he told me, and how Mom's failure taught me what happens when you try to shortcut that process. You wrote about your mother? Not cruelly, just honestly. About how her inability to face a simple challenge led to increasingly complex deceptions until everything collapsed. The admissions committee loved it. Grace, now 13, had become fascinated with architecture, spending hours designing impossible buildings that she insisted could work if we just rethink physics. Diana drove her to architecture camps, engineering workshops, anything that fed her curiosity. She's going to build something amazing one day, Diana said, watching Grace work on her latest design. She already is. She's building herself. Margaret had earned unsupervised visits by then, every other weekend as before, but now without the supervisor. The first time she picked the kids up alone, she parallel parked perfectly in front of our house. Got it on the first try, smooth and confident. I've been practicing, she said when she saw me watching from the window. I can see that. Not just the parking, everything. Being honest, facing hard things, not taking shortcuts. Good. Paul, the man I'm seeing, he doesn't let me avoid things. If I can't do something, he makes me learn. No excuses. Sounds healthy. It is. Different from before. We stood awkwardly for a moment. 2 people who'd once shared everything now struggling to share a driveway. I'm sorry, Richard, she said suddenly. Not just sorry I got caught. Sorry I did it. Sorry I was too proud to admit I couldn't do something basic. Sorry I let that pride destroy our family. I know. Do you forgive me? I thought about it. I forgive the person you're becoming. The person you were? That person doesn't need my forgiveness. She needs to be a cautionary tale. She nodded, understanding. For what it's worth, I use myself as a cautionary tale too. In therapy, in my support group, even at work. I tell people about how one small lie, I can't parallel park, became an enormous deception that destroyed everything. And what do they say? Usually they laugh at first. Then they get quiet when they realize how many small lies they're telling themselves. She left with the kids, navigating the tight street parking with newfound skill. Grace later told me they'd spent the afternoon at the Seattle Center, and Margaret had parallel parked downtown without hesitation. She didn't even seem nervous, Grace reported. Just did it. That's good. Is it weird that I'm proud of her for doing something everyone else can do? No, I said. Sometimes the biggest achievements are the ones that look simple from the outside. Diana and I had our first child together when Grace was 14. A boy we named Thomas, after Diana's father. The pregnancy was unexpected. We'd thought we were done with babies. But welcome. He's going to learn to parallel park before he can walk, Diana joked from her hospital bed. Priorities, I agreed. Margaret sent a congratulations card and a savings bond for Thomas. For his driving lessons, she'd written, start saving now. By the time he's 16, they'll probably cost a fortune. It was a small gesture, but appropriate. She was acknowledging her place outside our nuclear family while still maintaining connection. The therapy was working. As Thomas grew, the older kids helped teach him everything. Sam via video calls from college, Grace in person. They were determined he'd grow up knowing how to do things properly the first time. No shortcuts, Grace would tell him as he learned to stack blocks. Build the foundation right, or it all falls down. He's two, Diana laughed. He doesn't understand metaphors. He understands structure, Grace insisted. Look, he's sorting by size before stacking. That's genius-level spatial reasoning. Whether genius or not, Thomas grew up in a household where competence was expected and incompetence was addressed, not hidden. When he couldn't tie his shoes at 5, we spent weeks practicing until he could. When he struggled with swimming, Diana found him the best instructor in Seattle. No shame in not knowing, only in not learning. Margaret continued to improve. She got promoted at work, moved into her own apartment, even started dating Paul seriously. She brought him to Sam's college graduation, the first time we'd all been together for a family event. Paul was everything Connor wasn't: steady, reliable, employed, and possessed of a valid driver's license. He was an accountant who drove a sensible Honda Accord and parallel parked it competently, if not spectacularly. "So you're the ex-husband," he said, shaking my hand. "And you're the boyfriend. I've heard a lot about you. All of it deserved, from what I understand." That's an interesting way to put it. Margaret's been honest about what happened. Very honest. It's actually refreshing. My ex-wife still pretends she didn't cheat, even though I caught her red-handed. With someone who could parallel park? He laughed. With her personal trainer. Cliche, right? At least Margaret's affair had an interesting angle. The angle of the parking spot. Exactly. We actually got along, Paul and I. We were both men who'd been betrayed but had chosen to rebuild rather than remain bitter. Diana liked him too, appreciating his straightforward manner and his refusal to enable Margaret's remaining weaknesses. "He makes her face things," Diana observed after that first meeting. "That's what she needs. What she needed 15 years ago. Better late than never." Connor resurfaced briefly 5 years later. Not in person, but in the news. He'd been arrested again in Portland. Another DUI, this time with injury. He'd hit a pedestrian while drunk. The article mentioned his MIT degree, his fall from tech grace, his pattern of violations. It was a cautionary tale about privilege and consequences. Margaret texted me the link. "I could have been in that car." "But you weren't. Because you stopped it. Thank you." "You're welcome." That was the last we ever heard of Connor Bradley. He went to prison for 5 years, his brilliant mind wasted on addiction and ego. The man who'd once built neural networks now built nothing but regret. Sam got married at 25 to a fellow engineer named Ashley. At the reception, he gave a speech about foundations and structure, about building things properly from the start. "My dad taught me that you can't fake competence," he said. "You either have the skills or you don't. And if you don't, you learn. You don't hire someone else to do it and pretend you did it yourself." Everyone who knew the story understood. Margaret, sitting at a back table with Paul, wiped away tears. Later, she approached me at the bar. "That was about me," she said. "Yes, I deserve it. You did deserve it. Past tense. You're different now." "Am I, though? Or am I just better at pretending?" "The fact that you're asking that question means you're different." The old Margaret never questioned herself. The old Margaret couldn't parallel park. The old Margaret couldn't do a lot of things. This one can. She smiled sadly. Too little too late, but still, something. Something is better than nothing. Is it? Sometimes I think it would be easier if I just stayed awful. Then I wouldn't know what I lost. Knowledge is better than ignorance, even when it hurts. Speaking from experience? Every day. Grace became an architect, as we'd all known she would. Her senior thesis was about structural integrity in relationships, using building metaphors to explore human connections. She dedicated it to those who build on solid foundations and those who learn too late not to build on sand. "That's about Mom, isn't it?" Thomas asked. He was 12 by then, old enough to understand the family history. "It's about anyone who chooses deception over truth," Grace replied. "Mom just happens to be our most obvious example. Because of the parking thing? Because of everything the parking thing represented. Thomas, despite growing up with Diana the driving instructor as his stepmother, showed no particular interest in cars. He loved music instead, spending hours at the piano Diana had bought him for his 8th birthday. But when it came time to learn to drive, he approached it with the same methodical dedication he applied to Bach fugues. "It's just patterns," he said, after nailing parallel parking on his second try. "Like musical measures. You just have to understand the rhythm." "Everything's rhythm to you," Diana laughed. "Everything is rhythm. Even parking." Margaret came to his first recital, sitting in the back with Paul, now her husband. They'd gotten married quietly at City Hall, no fanfare, no pretense. She parallel parked perfectly outside the venue, I noticed, the final proof of her transformation. After the recital, she approached us. "He's talented," she said about Thomas. "He works hard," Diana replied. "That's the real talent, isn't it? Being willing to work." "Speaking from experience?" I asked, echoing our conversation from years before. "Every day," she replied, echoing my response. We stood there, the strange, extended family we'd become. Me and Diana, Margaret and Paul, the kids who'd learned that competence matters and deception destroys. It wasn't what any of us had planned, but it was real. "You know what's funny?" Margaret said suddenly. "I teach parallel parking now at the community center. Court ordered it first, but I kept doing it after. I've taught hundreds of people." "That is funny," Diana agreed, in an ironic way. "I tell them my story, not all of it, but enough, about how refusing to learn one simple thing led to losing everything. They usually think I'm exaggerating until I show them the newspaper articles about the trial." "You kept those?" "I laminated them. They're my teaching aids. This is what happens when you fake competence instead of developing it." It was the perfect ending to the story, really. The woman who couldn't parallel park, who destroyed her marriage rather than admit inadequacy, now teaching others the skill she'd avoided for so long. The ultimate redemption, or at least as close as she'd get. Connor Bradley died in prison. Not dramatically, just quietly. Liver failure from years of alcohol abuse. His mother sent me a letter blaming me for his death, saying if I hadn't pursued the charges, he might have gotten help sooner. I didn't respond. Some people never learn that actions have consequences, that blame doesn't change facts, that the geometry of truth doesn't care about your feelings. I kept the letter, though, filed with all the other documentation from that time. Sometimes I look through it all, the GPS records, the photos, the court documents. Not from bitterness, but as a reminder. A reminder of what happens when you enable instead of educate, when you accept deception instead of demanding truth, when you make excuses instead of expecting growth. Diana found me looking through it one evening. "Reliving the glory days?" she asked, joking. "Remembering the lessons." "Which ones?" "All of them. That competence matters. That honesty is essential. That parallel parking is never just about parallel parking. It's about being complete." "Exactly." She sat beside me, looking at a photo of Margaret's car perfectly parked between the smart car and the motorcycle, the one that started it all. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't seen the car that day?" The affair would have continued. Connor would have kept driving drunk. Eventually, something catastrophic would have happened. An accident, maybe with the kids in the car, or Margaret would have gotten pregnant, or Connor would have gotten arrested while driving her car. The truth always comes out. Just sometimes too late to prevent damage. Which is why you catch it early, you document, you confront, you don't enable, you parallel park your own car. "Everyone should parallel park their own car," Thomas called from the other room, practicing a particularly difficult passage. The notes fell like rain, precise and beautiful. He'd inherited neither Margaret's deception nor my enabling, but had learned from both. He faced challenges head-on, practiced until perfect, never pretended competence he hadn't earned. All 3 kids had learned that lesson, really. Sam the engineer who built things properly, Grace the architect who understood foundations, Thomas the musician who knew practice made perfect. None of them would ever destroy their lives over something as simple as parallel parking. "We did good," Diana said, listening to Thomas play. "We did. Even with everything that happened. because of everything that happened. The kids learned what happens when you fake it instead of making it. Margaret learned too, eventually, at great cost. Most important lessons come at great cost. She was right. Margaret had paid dearly for her education, her marriage, her children, her career, her reputation, her freedom. But she'd learned. She could parallel park now, literally and metaphorically. She faced hard truths instead of constructing elaborate lies. She'd become, finally, complete. I sometimes see her around Seattle, usually downtown where it all fell apart. She drives a sensible car now, parks it herself, walks with the quiet confidence of someone who's been broken and rebuilt. We nod if we make eye contact, acknowledgement of shared history and hard lessons. Once I saw her teaching parallel parking to a teenage girl who was crying with frustration. "I can't do it," the girl wailed. "It's impossible." "Nothing's impossible," Margaret said patiently, "but some things are hard, and the hard things are the most important to learn." Why? Because the hard things are the ones we're tempted to fake, and faking competence is the beginning of every downfall. That's dramatic. I lost my marriage, my children, my career, and my freedom because I couldn't parallel park and was too proud to admit it. Is that dramatic enough for you? The girl stopped crying, stared at Margaret, then determinedly got back in the driver's seat. "Show me again," she said. Margaret did, patient and thorough, teaching what had taken her 42 years to learn. That's the epilogue to our story, really. Not the divorce, not the arrests, not the destruction, but the rebuilding. Margaret teaching others what she'd failed to learn. Me raising kids who value competence over appearance. Diana showing that second chances can build stronger foundations than first ones. Even Connor, in his destruction, serving as a cautionary tale about the price of arrogance. Every ending is also a beginning. Every failure can become a lesson. Every perfectly parked car represents a choice to develop skill, rather than fake it. I still park downtown sometimes in that impossible spot between the smart car and motorcycle spaces. It's become my ritual, my reminder. I slide in perfectly now, years of practice making it automatic. But I remember when it was hard, when Margaret couldn't do it, when that inability started the cascade that destroyed everything. The spot's usually empty. Most people take one look at the spacing and keep driving. But occasionally, I see someone attempt it, usually failing, sometimes succeeding. When they succeed, I want to tell them they've done more than just park. They've proven they can face difficult things and master them. But I don't. Some lessons don't need words. Last week was the 15-year anniversary of the divorce. I didn't realize it until Margaret texted me. 15 years since the parking disaster. Thank you for not letting me continue living that lie. You're welcome. I mean it. If you'd let it go, I'd probably be dead from riding with Connor while he was drunk, or in prison for vehicular manslaughter, or still lying about everything. You give me too much credit. I was just protecting myself and the kids. By doing the right thing. That's all any of us can do. Are you happy now? I asked, genuinely curious. Content. Paul and I are good. Work is steady. I see the kids regularly. I can parallel park. It's enough. Good. Are you happy? I thought about it. Diana asleep upstairs, Thomas practicing piano, Sam expecting his first child, Grace designing her first skyscraper. A life built on solid foundations, no hidden weaknesses, everyone capable of parking their own cars. Yes, I said, completely. Good. You deserve it. We both got what we deserved, I guess. We got what we built, with very different materials, and very different foundations. Yours didn't collapse, because I didn't build on lies. The parking was my lie. What was your truth? That everyone should be able to park their own car, literally and metaphorically. Took me too long to learn that. But you learned. Too late, but yes. Never too late to learn. Only too late to avoid consequences. She sent a laughing emoji, the first time she'd ever done so in our communications. The engineer speaks truth. The engineer documents truth. There's a difference. Either way, truth wins. Always, I agreed. Even if it takes 15 years and a perfectly parked car to prove it. That's where I'll end this story. Not with the destruction, but with the rebuilding. Not with the lies, but with the truth they eventually revealed. Not with the affairs and arrests and divorces, but with the lessons learned and competencies developed. Margaret can parallel park now. It cost her everything to learn, but she learned. Connor can't drive at all. His refusal to face consequences cost him his freedom, his career, his life. The kids can all park perfectly. They learned early that competence matters more than appearance. Diana never had to learn. She could always do it. That's why she could teach others. And me? I can park anywhere, always could. But I learned something more important. Never enable incompetence. Never accept deception. Never make excuses for someone who refuses to grow. Document everything. Face truth directly. Park your own car. The geometry doesn't lie. The angles are either right or wrong. The car either fits or doesn't. Just like marriages. Just like trust. Just like life. Margaret couldn't parallel park. Such a small thing. Such a devastating consequence. Such an important lesson. Never fake what you can learn to do for real. Because sooner or later, you'll be alone in the driver's seat. The space will be impossibly tight. Everyone will be watching. And the truth will be undeniable. You either can or can't do it. And if you can't, you better learn before you lose everything.